Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Designing Justice. I'm Priyambaka Shivaji.
And I'm Shreya Tripathi.
We are part of the Justice, Access, and Lowering Delays in India initiative at the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy. Through this series, we'll be speaking to various stakeholders in the justice system to identify areas ripe for intervention and potential solutions for building universally accessible, inclusive, future ready, and better courts for all. Today, we're speaking with Shreya Shetty and Bhagyalaxmi Madapur, co-founders of 369 Ochre Studio.
369 Ochre Studio is an award-winning Bengaluru-based interdisciplinary design practice that integrates architecture, interiors, and urban design through universal design to create inclusive, sustainable, and context-responsive environments, while embedding accessibility and human-centric thinking as core principles across its projects. Shreya and Bhagya are also co-authors of the Court Design Handbook, published by the JALDI team in June 2024. They have been part of some of the audits that the team has also undertaken for certain high courts and district courts across the country.
Just to expand a little bit more about the audits, Jaldi's journey with court infrastructure started with undertaking an all India study to understand the status of judicial infrastructure in district courts across the country. And following this, the team, in collaboration with Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, published a report which provided a blueprint for litigant-friendly consumer court infrastructure that can be replicated and scaled for all consumer courts in the country. Following this and other audits undertaken in and other high courts and district courts, we published the Court Design Handbook, which not only provides principles and guidelines as to what an ideal district court should look like, but also provides policies for continuous monitoring and evaluation of the court complex through audits and user feedback. And Shreya and Bhagya have been with us every step of the way in this journey so far.
Um, Thank you so much, Shreya and Bhagya, for joining us. We are aiming for this to be a free-flowing conversation. We'll start off with a few questions that highlight your experiences with the justice system that we have seen together over the last few years. And then we'll move on to questions that are more centered around the potential solutions that we have proposed in our various work, as well as additional steps that we should take to ensure there's a continuous engagement with improving court infrastructure and services. To start off, first question, and please feel free, whoever is more comfortable to like jump in and answer. What has been the motivation for you to enter the architectural profession with a focus on accessibility? And how has your experience evolved through the audits that we have conducted of the various codes and also while authoring the Court Design Handbook?
First of all, hearty congratulations and brilliant job, and Shreya and Priyamada and with the entire Vidhi team. I think you guys are doing a lot of things that's impactful. And we are very, very thankful that, we are a part of it and, for interviewing us today as well and hearing our side of it. I think the main motivation is that I think architecture is what you kind of deal with day in, day out, right? You experience the entire infrastructure, which could act as a barrier and make sure there's a lot of delays. And that's how I think our collaboration started. It started with the fact that, how is justice getting delayed because of the infrastructure part of it? And that's where the handbook came into existence. Personally, my brother is also a person with disability, and that is the highest motivation for me to learn about it and move forward. And when we did look into, the courts and we did the accessibility audit, there were so many aspects which we do study in design, but it doesn't impact you until unless you go there and see every small corner and you experience it with the people who are using the space. I think our audits included a lot of interviews. It included, first hand walking around the space with everybody. And that's what changed a lot of perspective and what went into our handbook as well. If you see the handbook, I think one of the main things that at least, has touched me the most is the vulnerable witness part of it. Because I think a huge part of the cognitive impact that an infrastructure can have is kind of written about in the handbook, and that would be, a great thing to take forward as well.
Bhagya, do you also want to jump
Yes,
and say something?
definitely. Yes, sorry. Actually, the main idea or the motivation I could say is like during the studies and also during the professional practice, I kept observing that many of the public buildings, especially the court complexes or the court institutions, are being designed or have been built around the so-called able-bodied by default, unintentionally excluding them. Like, no, it was not intentional, but the whole thing built around that. And also, what is being like when doing the audit, which has deepened our understanding, is that it's not a auditing is not definitely a checklist sort of. It's more to do with the experiential understanding. What I mean by experiential understanding is like you try to understand it's not as a legal obligation or a technical obligation. It's more to do with how each personnel, right from the judges, lawyer to litigant to witness, and even the support staff or the prison staff or the security or even the facility management team, everyone navigates and interacts with the whole court complex. And having co-authored Jaldi's design guidebook has actually deepened our understanding, and also it has evolved us. It has helped us to evolve from our observations into deploying or strategizing more design solutions which can be implemented, scalable, and context specific, especially looking at the constraints that we have in an already set system. So far I can say that it has evolved from just as an observation or just as a finding the gaps to how you can use these identifications to help people implement scalable solutions in a very like a phased manner. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting, and you're right. A lot of the courts that we visited, we've seen that unfortunately the reality is that they aren't, because anywhere near being universally accessible for all, and we need to think deeper on these solutions that we can implement. So, just on this, we've also visited courts where some attempts have been made to have some level of accessibility features in place. So, for example, we've seen that some courts have attempted to retrofit solutions with ramps and wheelchair pathways, and they've designated certain washrooms as accessible washrooms, etc. So in your opinion, based on what we've seen so far, uh, how usable do you think these features have really been when they've been retrofitted onto existing solutions so far, and are there any best practices that you see that you've seen anywhere that you think we can use as a model for implementing and scaling up elsewhere as well?
I think one of the main, issue that we ended up seeing, even if things are retrofitted, is to do with the sensitization, the training, the behavior of each one of us who kind of look at the space. So if there is a tactile paver put somewhere, a bike is parked right over it. So it has to start from first, one of the main things is probably the sensitization and training part of it. Awareness is extremely important. I think we are nowhere near that. Some people may not even realize that there are these tactile pavers. In India, we wouldn't say that, like best practices, there are bits and pieces here and there. But holistically, there's a lot to be done. And I think there has to be, more experts onboarded during all of this. When I say experts, I mean people who are involved with how accessibility parameters can be implemented. It's more from the implementation side of it as well. So even if something's put and it's retrofitted, it may not have been installed properly or in the right spaces. Like the tactile pavers in many courts we have seen, they've put it, but it didn't lead up to the signages at all. And when we spoke to the users, they were like, they were not even aware of the fact that there are tactile pavers or there are accessible signages. Then who is it for? So I think it starts from here, is what I feel. It's sensitization and training, and at every single level, you name it, and everybody should be sensitized. Whether it's a security staff, whether it is people who are implementing from the PWD or from all of it. Everybody needs to be sensitized, including all of us. So I think it's going to take a while till we actually be able to name the best practice which we can learn from.
To add to what Shreya is telling, absolutely, I agree that the key issue is the features are provided in isolation, like without considering the complete user journey, like from the entry to the courtroom or to the washroom, service counters. So it actually accessibility must function as a continuous intuitive system and not as a fragmented interventions. But from the auditing experiences, that what we have noticed and the kind of in the guidebook, that solutions that we have tried to come up with, maybe to begin with, we can say like start off with an incremental approach, like maybe designing a very accessible primary route, not as a secondary or as a like no a back of the office entry, so that the dignity, the respect, or the access to justice is kind of like no assured right from the entry point. And maybe like ensuring clear wayfinding, as Shreya mentioned, tactile cues, visual contrast. And maybe the accessibility facilities, if you are noticed, they are always given at a remote corners. They are not spaced along the high use or logical routes or the paths that we take. And most of the important factors that we have seen is like the accessibility features exist, but because of the maintenance protocol, their absence and accountability, they are always like no either repurposed. Great example is your washroom. They say operationally we can't maintain it, so they are always either locked or repurposed as a janitor room or anything. I mean, me and Shreya have seen it 100 times. Like you go and say with the, I mean, like no, accepting that there is a PWD accessible toilet, but you end up seeing a lot of storage. So I think, and most importantly, I feel involving PWDs with not only mobility, cognitive, and hearing, visual, the involving them in the post occupancy evaluations. So this will give you first hand feedback, like know what went wrong. Because as a designers, sometimes we also may not step into the actual need or requirement. So this feedback will definitely help, and this should become a practice not only during designing, even pre-design and post occupancy, like when the court is operational or any public building is operational. Yeah.
So, I mean, like you mentioned, like a lot of times when we have seen, say, like a washroom that is, built for persons with disabilities, and we have seen that it has been locked. So, one of the things that we have also kind of faced when we have spoken to officials is that a lot of things to do with accessibility is considered as almost like an extra cost. It's not considered as part of your general budgeting and planning for the court. So what is your response to that? That, when you are putting in these certain elements, your cost of the infrastructure is rising up considerably, and that becomes an excuse. So how do we then convince court officials or like just people in general in any public building that it's a worthwhile cost?
First of all, I think that's a wrong notion because accessibility is not a choice, it is mandatory. I think if we go with universal design, we are talking about anything that is comfortable for everyone. And when we say everyone, we are not counting one or two. We are talking about a 2.2% of our population, which is persons with disability. And that's Australia, complete Australia is persons with disability, if you count it like that in India. So you're telling, when people say things like that, it's very challenging. As I said earlier, I think awareness is something that has to be at every step We need to keep creating awareness, and we need to collaborate more. We need to have multidisciplinary, teams coming together to kind of work on this. And uh, as I earlier said, accessibility is mandatory. There is nothing, it's not a choice. When I'm creating any uh, infrastructure in any format, it needs to be accessible, right? So people cannot cut corners with it. And this costing part of it, you're ready to put marble and granite and onyx, but you're not ready to put a simple ramp, which may not cost you as much. So I don't think that is logical. I think that's a way of putting it across, but it's not really true. We work with accessible homes, and we haven't seen the cost escalate as much as people portray it to be. I think if you mean to do it, it's a matter of design interventions. So I think with design, a lot of things can be solved. But yes, if you go to retrofit it after you've caused the damage, I think that is with anything in life. So I think I will rest my case there by saying that please make sure it's mandatory. It's not a choice at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, what one thing we have understood, like when the audits are conducted, it's with one primary understanding, like what are the gaps and how it can be phased out when you want to address it. So, what we think that audit should be strategic and prioritized, not like a exhaustive wish list. Okay, this should be done. This should be done. This should. It's humanly impossible. So maybe we can try to focus on, as I mentioned earlier, mostly like a incremental basis, and maybe like start with something which has a high impact but low cost. For example, you can say like signages, lighting, furniture layout, or maybe a surface finishes. These are very manageable, and maybe like you have to align these aspects with the maintenance cycle or the renovation cycle of the entire court complex, so that it is integrated within that, so that it doesn't become there is a separate accessibility audit for this and separate accessibility funding, so that it is built upon that. And for example, also like when you call the tender, when you call the contractor, make sure the accessibility standards are included in the tenders, included in the detailed project reports, so that the budgeting is done. And also, these phased retrofit strategies should have those recurring maintenance cost also allocated. It's not only for implementing; it's also maintenance. That's what even includes your capacity building, sensitization workshops where experts come and do that. These are all recurring, okay, because staff keep changing. The agency that those are maintaining facilities, they keep changing, so the recurring cost should be incorporated, and it should be built within, integrated within the overall budget of the court, so that it is more doable. But of course we say like no, it has to be incremental, and it has to the audit should also come up with such a way that okay, this has to be, it should be aware of the context specific problems. Okay, there is a budget constraint, there is a technical constraint, but also there has to be a list which is like non-negotiable. Okay, this has to be done. There are certain things, and then you next phase it out. So integrating into the overall court complex of operations and maintenance and whatever the expansion that happens over a period is important. So that might address to large degree.
We also have another follow-up question about sensitization in particular. We'll get to that in just a bit. But before that, just to stay on this theme of what we're mentioning about how accessibility is not a choice and it's something that everyone should be seized to the need to ensure that it is underlying everything, every action that is taken. So, I think we've also noticed that in some instances, despite best intentions, measures that are meant for empowering persons with disabilities often sometimes also end up dismissing them or patronizing them, might be a better term, ends up sort of, patronizing their actual experiences, and it becomes a very uh, mechanical top-down approach of sorts. So, how can we ensure that dignity is prioritized when we think of these solutions that we have to take up and in anything that we have to do? How can we ensure that the dignity of persons with disabilities is placed at the forefront of all of this?
I think we usually speak about human-centric approach. And when we talk about human-centric approach, we talk about participatory processes, where you don't design with a top-down approach. You understand what is the requirement for that particular space with the particular stakeholders, right? And then you go ahead. So at every, even though we have done a couple of accessible homes, it'll be very interesting for you all to know that every accessible home we had to do a participatory process which taught us something new. So for example, the first home that we did for a person on the wheelchair had completely different requirements as compared to the second one. And that person was also on the wheelchair, but the wheelchairs were also different. And so that's when the universal design comes into account. And you kind of understand the requirement of everybody, and there are some standards pulled out. And that requires more feedback and more, participatory process during the process of design and retrofitting. And that will change the way that you would go ahead and design something. So these processes are not usually, calculated. It's just thought of that, okay, you know what? Let me take this parcel of land and this is the way we can do it. It's not a modular format. It cannot be a modular format. It has to be developed with, it's just like with time. Today we are interviewing on Zoom as compared to a couple of years back. Before, I think COVID, we wouldn't have done this. So I think it's, you have to learn and you have to, keep changing things as and when new development comes in. And that means you bring in the multidisciplinary team, you bring in the different stakeholders, you create that participatory, give it more time in the initial part of the design rather than retrofitting it later. So that makes a huge impact as well. Even when you're retrofitting, you're still designing to retrofit. So please make sure that that's when you need to put in all your effort and the time that you need to create. Because every time we guys get into a project, we architects are always told, I need it yesterday. That's not how it'll work. You need to understand that these things take time and they need that kind of importance, and you need to give it time to develop to a certain level. So that's what I feel that would work out better. The process in which we work or the systems with which we take things forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. The process is more important because it also helps us to think in different perspectives. And also, when I say patronizing experiences, it's mainly because of the when the accessible solutions are overly assistive. Like it's not like helping in self navigation, but where you constantly need assistance. Okay, that's when you feel all the more like no. In case like no dignity is compromised, and sometimes people try to help without the consensual, like no there is no proper way of okay can I help, I mean the intentions are good but that person may not need it. And also staff training is very important because so that assistance when it is offered also it is very appropriate and it is more built on a consensual level. And also one of the important thing is like when accessible facilities are given, like no to prioritize dignity, the design plays an important role. When you are designing something, make sure these accessible routes or facilities are integrated, not visibly special. Like how we see like in most of the cases there is these scanners, like body scanners. So you have something like a I know that there has to be a signage, but suddenly you feel like no, even if we experience it when we have a third gender signage, okay, whether I mean like it's just makes you feel little conscious, or maybe you feel it's very awkward. I mean like no, there is no enabling independence choice. So I ultimately think like no design is preserved when PWDs are treated as users, equal users, not as exceptions who require special handling. Okay, so this is what precisely Shreya was trying to tell, like the sensitization at every step.
Right.
Yes.
So, I mean, yeah, because we have been talking about sensitization and training. Um, I know that you guys not, of course, you have worked with us with courts, but you, of course, have your own other teams that you work with. So have you conducted, say, sensitization and training programs in like other contexts? And in that, what does that entail? Like, what are some of the major gaps that you have seen that come across very clearly in some of these sessions? And like, uh, generally that in particular if you are talking about courts, then who are these stakeholders who also need to be sensitized, as opposed to just the court staff? Like, who are all the stakeholders in this process that need to be sensitized? And yeah, what have been some of the gaps you have seen when you have done any sensitization training program generally?
I think we realized the need for a sensitization or a capacity building workshop also was when we would say something which is not as per what is practiced. Most of the people who work in the construction industry are people who have learned from whatever they've seen before. So one of the contractors, when I told him that let the step be 6 inch, he said, "Why 6 inch? Everybody practices 7 inch. Why do you want 6 inch?" And that hit a chord for us. It said, okay, if we want to change this, then you need to change what they regularly see. So in India, we do not really see an accessible, and there is no standard that's followed because a lot of construction that takes place happens out of what is being seen rather than what the standards are. Not everything is followed to the T, and that's the truth of the art, right? So that is the first thing that comes in the construction side of it. Coming to the architectural side of it, we have studied architecture, and the first grab bar or accessible thing I tried to put was a towel rail because I was not aware of it. The first harmonized guidelines was only in 2016, and I passed out way before that. So when you experience all this, you know that awareness is the bigger problem, right? Awareness at any level. It's not like one thing that has caught our attention. It's a different level of acceptance, and the way you will sensitize each one is also different. So people with authority feel that nothing can happen. They are at the safest space. They don't need a ramp, but a ramp is comfortable for anybody to walk if it's in the right ratio. 1:12 is very comfortable. Even none of us will realize we have walked up on it, including a toddler. So I think it's completely a wrong notion. You see a ramp, you're like, no, 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 only a person on the wheelchair should go on it. It's not like that. If it's in the right ratio, then everybody will walk on it. You won't realize at all. So I think the main thing that in the sensitization, the couple of things we saw, it's at least for me, that keeps coming out is that people are used to seeing a certain thing a certain way, and we are not used to accept that something can be different. It may be right or wrong, that doesn't matter. So that's the main thing that has hit what I have experienced.
Yeah, whenever we have tried to conduct these sensitization workshops, or for that matter, the sessions, the major gaps what we see is like there is no idea about understanding different types of this, like no beyond mobility. Like now, whenever we talk, everyone talks about mobility, and that is looks like that is the only issue. Okay, so even when you try to explain, like, okay, there are certain things called as cognitive. Even when, I mean, I and Shreya have asked 100 times, like, do you at least know how many disabilities are listed legally in India? Some people say 100, some people say 7, some people like, no. I mean, very rarely somebody tells like 20, 21 numbers. Okay, so this is very interesting to know, and also I feel like no, I mean it's not our fault. Even right from the school, it's not been told like no, okay, and these things are also like, why don't you send them to special school or something, or having a shadow teacher or shadow pal or something. I mean that's what we it comes to like no. When I said it, they are almost like no, as if you need somebody to assist them, which is not the case. Okay, so and also one of the main gaps we have found is like there is no connect between the design and the ground use, on ground use. Okay, so like earlier how we mentioned, they think okay, there is some accessibility standards is put in something like a standard book, like a national code book or something, so we need to follow. That's just a guideline. It just tells you okay, this is what you can do basically. Okay, essentially, they cannot address all the context. Even in our design guide handbook, we might have addressed a certain context, which are on an average may be applicable. Okay, but that just gives you a thumb rule. It may not specify you to the like, no, okay, this has to be done like this. So for that, we need accessibility experts. We need people who are trained in that, the people who can actually design and tell you how it can be done, what can be done, because every court, even if you go to any district court or high court, it's entirely different. The context is different. We ourselves have seen Delhi High Court, we ourselves have seen Shimla High Court, so there is vast difference. So the guidebook will give you just a rule. Even in colleges also they can only teach you okay, you should have this much features, but that's not the end of it. So this is a continuous evolving things, and it has to keep up pace. This is, I mean, this is how the gaps could be minimized. I cannot say it can be completely addressed, but it could be addressed to certain extent.
I think this brings me to one more very interesting point. I think when we started when we started learning about codes from you guys, go to the courtrooms more often than us designers. One of the things that hit us the most was, I think, the route for the vulnerable witness, the entry for them, which has to be different from, when from the other entrances, so that you can, maintain confidentiality and all of that, which room they are in and how, that could be done. And this is something that I don't think we realized it earlier. If we had to design it to learn this, you
think
have
we
to
realized it either. So, yeah, when we discussed it together was when I think, please continue. But
So I think it becomes very interesting that there are these smaller nuances. And when we looked at child-friendly spaces, you usually see smaller rooms with toys only for small kids. Whereas, when you're talking about POXO, it is a range of age groups. It is not just 0 to 3. We're going to play with stuffed toys. It is way beyond. And we didn't realize all this only when we started talking to so many people through our experience when we were doing the handbook. It, kind of made an impact. The colors, because every audit we went to, there were varied colors used. And we realized that colors play such an important role in accessibility and in, how it could kind of disturb somebody as well. So I think these kind of smaller nuances are there in our handbook, and it was very well realized by us. And we learned a lot from, doing this. For that matter, even the IT part of it, right? Like basically, how do you even get to the court and know there are accessible features? Is it even available on the website? And there are so many other things, fire safety related informations. So it was an interesting, learning, and there were a lot of smaller nuances, which I think only when you get involved and you experience it, you get to know. So.
I think these examples, the vulnerable witness one, and also uh, showing that there's a lot of other things that go on in the functioning of a code that we don't really realize, is also important for another sort of related point here, which is that we've seen that in the judicial context, a lot of these training and sensitization sessions are often limited or restricted to just the judges or the lawyers. Right? But we're seeing that there's a whole range of other stakeholders that are also involved here. And if you're talking about child-friendly design principles, this is something that needs to be brought about to support persons working with children. It needs to be brought about to the staff at the creche and facilities in the court complex and so on and so forth. So
and for that matter, even the social workers who are coming into the court with
yes,
the you know, vulnerable witnesses, because they are not a part of the court complex. They are outside, and but they are the ones who are getting them in. So that whole journey is also to be, looked into and sensitized. So it goes way beyond just the court complex when you do it. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. I think something sort of interesting here is that in our handbook, as you mentioned, we also have a section there about policies for empowering persons to have this sort of continuous engagement with the judicial system or the courts that they are interacting with. And this includes, from an infrastructure point of view, it includes, things like a facilities management policy, data management policy, but it also includes these other things about sensitization from fire safety point of view, or sensitization from a vulnerable witness point of view, and so on and so forth. So perhaps just to expand a bit more on that, could you tell us how we can strengthen, in your opinion, how do you think such programs, which sensitization programs, which would cover this wider group of actors in the ecosystem, how can we ensure that this actually takes place? What sort of interdisciplinary experts would we need for those sessions? And if we want to empower people to conduct audits themselves of courts that they visit, the way we sort of want to do with our handbook, as well, and the checklist that we provide there, then what are the components of a holistic audit framework that a litigant, or any third person who is just visiting a court, would want to keep in mind to be able to assess how the state of infrastructure of their court is?
A holistic audit framework, for that matter, it's not, as we mentioned in the beginning, it's not a checklist related. It has to have that user experience based, experiential understanding, how a person, like from the litigant to the person who is visiting in first time, okay, who is actually in distress. And it's so overwhelming. Like, no, always the entrances are crowded and it's not clear. And you are already in a distress. Okay, it adds to that.
That's
And
because courtrooms are seen as intimidating,
yes,
isn't it? Like you have this authority kind of feeling when you talk about
yes,
court.
that is true. And also when even for our own court complexes which are designed, okay, I mean nothing to do with the design or the master architect, whoever has designed. The scale is humongous. Like, no, you feel okay. It might be implying that the scale. I mean, it shows the authority, as Shreya mentioned, but also at the same time, it is very intimidating. Okay, and already the person is in distress, and plus you are adding to it. And imagine a PWD who is entering for the first time without anyone. Okay, so you are right, in the entrance only you are denying the access as per the constitutional right of equity and justice. Forget anything else. Okay, so I that's the reason the auditing framework should not be a checklist, but it should also have a certain categories like physical accessibility, where all your physical built infrastructure, including circulation, courtrooms, waiting areas. The most important aspect of next to physical is your cognitive accessibility. So the layouts are clear, they are intuitive wayfinding, and also simplified signage, not overly complex. And I think even in while writing the design handbook, also we discussed a lot about sensory accessibility, like your acoustics, lighting, visual contrast, tactile information, and most importantly, I feel like, no, the operational practices, because all this can be achieved, but if there is staff behavior, the I mean, like, no, stubbornness about not doing it, okay, might negate everything else. So I think that security protocols or the maintenance, how the staff is behaving, that also should be the part of the holistic audit framework. And apart from this, I think we also have addressed user journey mapping, and we have also tried to give actionable recommendation, okay, with regard to prioritization, timelines, as well as cost implications. So, in our experience, we feel these are the subheadings which form the holistic auditing framework. There could be several others based on the case specific, could be added.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, I think one thing that has come up is quite clear is that, when we are the thinking around how to design code complexes to ensure that they are accessible, that also needs to change a little. So in your opinion, firstly, like what should, if we were to start rethinking code complexes, what would be like maybe this one thing that you would like to like change about the code complex, if like even if it's like a small thing, big thing, doesn't matter, but what would be like one thing that you think really needs to change or really needs to be redesigned when you're thinking about code complexes? And also like when we are thinking of like architects in the future, like what is this kind of information you would like to impart to them as well to ensure that this rethinking is happening for future architects as well?
To address to the first part of your question, as I was mentioning, the entry itself. Okay, if given a chance, we would try to have a clear circulation path, entry path, maybe a arrival plaza, which has a better like no signage, which is accessible, which has a good waiting and shaded spaces with all primary facilities like no drinking water, and because you come with different age groups, there are children, there are elderly people, there are people who are like going through certain ailment, so you try to have those all weather addressed arrival plaza. I think this is doable because most of us have seen these huge canopies built, which just holds VIP arrival. Okay, and for nothing else. So I think that will be the first intervention. Maybe like it is also got to be do the very fraction of costing, and maybe and also I'm not saying you should compromise with the security, but because the access and security should be part of this, but they should be integrated. It should not become like no, it is exclusive for somebody. And maybe introduce certain signages, kiosk, digital kiosk also, so that you have those things sorted even before you enter the actual premises of the court. So half your crowd is managed and at the entrance itself. So the navigation, internal navigation is clear. So provide those tactile maps, tactile signages, the layout, tactile layouts, what we have seen in many of the recent high court buildings.
But I think one thing that I want to tell the young architects would be that, I think hear what people are saying, observe whatever you can, and then bring it down to paper. Don't think that Pinterest is your design guide. We see a lot of kids coming up with brilliant 3Ds, and it is like, overwhelming for us also that, wow, how did they do this? And that's great skill. It's a great skill set. Nobody's saying no. But I think if you cannot cater at eye level, then you're losing the purpose. If you cannot cater to a design where somebody is experiencing it in different ways, be it foot, be it by vehicle, be it by any of these aspects, then you've actually lost the whole purpose of designing what you have. And also, like they say, whatever you do it in a way that a 4-year-old understands it. And in many of our sensitization programs, when we say something like this, people are like, 4-year-old will have somebody to help them. Why? They are way smarter than we think. So when we design, you have to design for everybody. You have to design for, in the simplest of manners, like Bhagya said, like the signages need to be easily understood. It shouldn't be like, okay, what is this extra creative way of interpreting something? And that's where, again, the universal design comes into account. Yeah, I think, and one, like she said, that invitation, the entrance, that's a very interesting thing that if we change the way we look at codes, it may help us, than the authority part of it. And I think for me personally, the learning part was greatest when we studied about the child-friendly and the vulnerable witness zones, because they were so sensitized in so many different ways, that it taught us a lot. So I think that is another space that we need to really look into in the code complexes.
That was very fascinating for us to hear, and I think that's been the one of the biggest benefits of our collaboration has been, getting to share our experiences and breaking down this barrier between law and architecture, or any of these other domains, because clearly there's so much to be gained from talking with each other and learning from each other, and so that we can ensure that things work better in both areas. So uh, we've come to the end of the interview for today. So thank you so much, Shreya and Bhagya, for so generously sharing your insights and experiences with us. And not just today, of course, but also specifically for this one conversation. So we really appreciate all the time and thought and insights that you've brought to this conversation. And of course, we want to keep the conversation on ensuring accessible code design going forward as well. So thank you so much for your contribution so far towards this ongoing journey that all of us have towards ensuring that we can have a justice system that's more universally accessible and more committed to ensuring dignity and equality for all.
Thank you so much for having us and actually opening our eyes to the different areas where we also needed a lot more exposure. So we had a, brilliant learning from all of y'all as well. And looking forward to many more such learnings. So wish you guys all the best. This series are very interesting. We'll be watching the next one you're recording.